Hey y'all, just real quick before we dive into the main program, I just want to give a quick word about the platform that I'm using, Anchor FM. It's been a good platform so far with the program and just distributing. It's a multi-platform sort of deal, so it sends out to Spotify, Google, iTunes, a whole list of hosting sites. So it's definitely a good place to start if you're a beginner or who wants to step into this field. You really don't need any experience at all. You just do it, right? So the sponsorship has been a good deal for me so far, and definitely a good way to build on the program that you want to distribute or you want to record. So yeah, so definitely check it out, Anchor FM. Also, if you want to skip these sponsorship intros, you can go to my Patreon, Collapse Talk, and for $1 you can get early access, ad-free access, as well as other exclusive content that I build on and work on. So definitely check it out there, Patreon. But yeah, so now without further ado, we will jump into the main program. Hello, welcome back. This is episode 27 of Collapse Talk, and you're listening to Gabriel. And I'm hoping that y'all are staying warm in this cold, wintry February with this cold snap. And I know I'm, bundled up. If you'd see me right now, I'm kind of like just covered in layers. So it's kind of why I like doing audio, because at least I can just look however I want and just record from there. But yeah, I just wanted to release something right now, especially since they've finally finished with the second impeachment trial and Trump is acquitted. I barely kept up with it because it was just, yeah, it wasn't really much. And of course, we see the payoff. So I wasn't really invested in it. And yeah, it's quite predictable, actually. All of this is just predictable. And so now we're going back right to normal business, and we'll see if they actually move ahead now, since this whole impeachment show is over, with some real relief with stimulus checks. But we can talk about that later on. But yeah, this is kind of the Valentine's weekend, so I'm guessing people are gearing up to treat their special loved ones. Yeah, it's honestly just a marketing scheme. You should be treating your loved ones good, just unconditionally. But then again, it's still nice to treat whenever the day arrives, or whoever. Yeah, again, I'm an incel, so yeah, that whole dating scene isn't exactly my strong suit. But I didn't really want to talk about that, but it's been a week since the Super Bowl event, and yeah, a lot has been happening in the last couple of weeks, so I just want to talk about that, at least in concerns to the Super Bowl, because I didn't really watch that either, but I have seen like the memes and the Twitter, posts, especially with the halftime show with the weekend. But I also found it interesting, just the whole like complete disregard for the pandemic. I mean, if you just like watch that in the vacuum, like it would just be a normal Super Bowl event, and not one that's in a once in a generation pandemic. That's basically at the height still. We're still in the height of it, and I'm just curious to see how rates continue. I'm guessing this is a bit of a super spreader event, not just at that specific stadium. I'm so out of the loop. I didn't watch it. I don't even know where they played it. But yeah, you have the Super Bowl event, the physical event, and then people also just getting together and partying, having their own little Super Bowls, and probably still having the regular like finger food stuff, dip. Yeah. So we'll see how this Super Bowl has affected the COVID rates and infections, especially with this new UK variant. Although the vaccine does cover it, or supposedly that's what they're saying. So yeah, we'll talk about that as we elaborate with the show. But there's just a lot to cover, and with this show, of course, we divide our segments. I mean, this is kind of more of the opening bit, but we have more segments dividing really between the domestic, the international, and the natural world, because collapse is more all-encompassing. So there's many different areas of collapse that we can talk on. And of course, there's going to be things that I miss because there's just so many things that are evolving. And this is happening in real time. So yeah, at the very least, before I dive into the broader domestic field, I wanted to talk about like a specific incident that I'm sure some people have watched or at least, seen. And it concerns this clip with this shooting in Pennsylvania. So you might know what I'm talking about. This suburban, basically just breakdown of this, man living on his own, and his neighbors harassing him over shoveling of snow, and he reaches his breaking point, comes out and just shoots them in the street, executes them. It's a pretty wild video. And if you listen to Tim Dillon, and I'm sure people have different thoughts of him, I certainly like to listen to him. He has his, from his last episode, just a great opening bit. I mean, like, it's literally like probably one of the best opening bits, or just a bit in general, of any like comedy podcast that I've certainly listened to. And I think it's going to be one of his most iconic, like, just bits. But he talks about how people are just on edge, and yeah, people are just at their breaking point. You don't know where the breaking point is, but apparently shoveling snow into someone's driveway and just shouting at them and saying, "We're gonna mess with you. We're gonna do pussy." Yeah, that's enough to get somebody to come out and execute you and your wife in front of their child, and just yeah, it's crazy. People are on edge, but if that's, to me, just speaks as to another reason of not living in the suburbs, because I can't imagine how more mentally strained people are going to be down the line, and just having to deal with neighborhood politics. It's crazy, like dealing with HOA, and yeah. So, certainly as urban collapse and decline, becomes more degraded, it's certainly going to be a strain on these suburban areas. And not just that, like middle class stagnation, all these different things. I mean, this is all this mental health, mass hysteria, if you want to call it, because I think this country and our society in general is just experiencing mass hysteria. We just don't know it yet. It's primarily a product of this capitalist, profit over everything mentality. But yeah, so I'm certainly not qualified to go examine just the sociological implications of that, but it certainly has a connection. At the very least, though, speaking to this capitalist, mindset, we can look at, the recent weeks of activity in the stock market, right, with wallstreetbets and their campaign with Gamestop and AMC, and the whole short selling Yeah, I'm sure now everybody's been acquainted about the situation. It's just nice to see finally people are taking the stand and fighting back, because this is basically the best way we can do it. Because when I look at, and again, when I've criticized these riots, not that the protests, the BLM protests, are connected with the riots, but it's the same environment, unfortunately, and it's counterproductive because, of course, the media just focuses on the fires and the chaos and the destruction, and then public opinion is against the movement and, in an extent, the policies that the movement pushes. But for the people on the ground, they see it as, oh, this is our way of fighting back. We have to burn down whatever, cause chaos, just to disrupt things. Instead, you have something like Wall Street Bets, where they're actually hitting these elites where it hurts, where, and not just that, they're playing the game like the way they play it. So it really shows to the fact that we have real power. And that's why you saw a lot of these different pundits and different, those Wall Street guys. I don't even watch those shows, those pundits, but yeah, they're all like coming out now, and they're like having just a meltdown. I mean, you can tell that they're pissed off that they're losing money, and these fucking peasants are, they're acting out of line, and they're taking serious considerations like Robin Hood, and maybe there should be an income threshold, and yeah, so much. It really highlighted, obviously, what we know, but it just made it obvious to the world that this is just a scam. Like these guys are full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about either. And yeah, nobody knows. That it's all fake money with the whole stock market. It's fake money. But of course we have the Wall Street Bets, basically the front lines of the class war now. And now people are playing the stock market, which is, I guess, a good thing. People need to make money and invest and just watch it grow. We'll see. Again, I certainly hope that there isn't some kind of bubble burst, although it is inevitable. And we have, of course, the Fed printing out money, and we have concerns of hyperinflation, all that stuff. I'm just curious, though, how that's going to be paired with all this cryptocurrency as well. And of course, everybody now is playing Dogecoin, and I've bought into Dogecoin as well. Yeah, and I'm going to hold, because if I've done my math right, I could walk away with a lot. Even if I'm off by like 0.0 milliseconds, whatever, I could still walk away with enough to like pay off my debts and like really like set myself up for success. So it's just the math. I have to make my math right. But buying those dips and holding and waiting, and I just have to be patient, because I keep checking the app and I'm like, where is it at now? But I'm just like, it's not gonna jump to $1 in the course of hours. But then again, people sleep on it, and then you see some serious movements. So yeah, again, I just gotta learn to be patient and just keep watching it. I mean, I've basically it's just planting these seeds and just waiting it for it to grow. And yeah, because everything that they're saying now about Dogecoin, they're saying about Bitcoin. Like, I remember all the talks about Bitcoin, like, it's nothing, and then look at it now, So yeah, and of course, people are also pointing to Elon Musk, saying that he's doing it for profit, or of course, of course he's pumping and dumping it. All these different big fish, big wallet people, of course they're pumping it and dumping it, but ultimately they still want it to rise, because the thing with Bitcoin is that it's already like over 40,000. So even though they might have millions, and that still might not be much, like that's nothing. 40,000 is nothing. It's still, Dogecoin is still exponentially going to yield a far greater profit if it hits $1 compared to Bitcoin. So yeah, again, I don't know much. I'm just like, I'm talking out of my ass, and of course that's the whole point of this show. I'm just been talking out of my ass, but I'm just trying to make these observations, do my research, and just playing, because what do I have to lose? I mean, I'm pretty fucked anyway, so might as well play. And yeah, I mean, like, this could, if it pays off, I can really actually start, forging a path. And I have all these dreams and these plans that if it pays off, I could actually, like, it's actually tangible. That's what I'm trying to say. So again, it's not just me that's also in this position of wanting Dogecoin to rise, but it's just nothing would make me happier to beat the system by playing it, right? And this is what Dogecoin is about. We're playing the system like they want us to, all right? So, but then again, it's risk and reward and all sorts of calculations to make, because it's all chance and it's all fate, I guess, and luck and patience. But we'll see. I'm also trying to diversify my portfolio, looking at other cryptocurrencies to at least soften the blow. But it's just, even though I talk about like the worst possible case, like Mad Max scenarios, I just might as well plan for maybe some semblance of technical civilization. Who knows? Maybe I could make a little spot in the cyberpunk dystopia. That's what I basically have to plan out for. I mean, because this essentially, if it works out well, could be my retirement. Because I know I'm not getting any Social Security, that's for sure. So, yeah. But as we have cryptocurrency and the stock market, it's curious also about, or I'm curious also about questions of hyperinflation. Because as I said, or as has been shown, the Fed has just been pumping out cash, and just a crazy amount. And so, of course, hyperinflation is bound to hit us, or at least that's what many are concerned about. At least I've been reading from Yahoo Finance, and they're effectively saying that we'll see some inflation, and it may affect just pricings. So we'll have to see. Again, I know little about like monetary policy and all this stuff, so it's mumbo jumbo, but it's still something to examine and at least to plan out for, so might as well read into it. But reading from Yahoo Finance, it says, quote, "The United States hasn't seen significant inflation in almost 40 years. That may change soon, thanks to a massive federal deficit, pent-up demand when quarantine restrictions are released, and a shift in Federal Reserve monetary policy. Last week, Bill Dudley, the former president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, made waves with his column, 5 Reasons to Worry About Faster U.S. Inflation, for Bloomberg. On Monday, however, 2 of the publication's economic reporters called 2021 inflation a mirage. What exactly is inflation anyway? And do you really need to worry about it or not? Let me read further. Inflation is an increase in price levels. Inflation is the opposite of deflation, which is the decrease in prices. And of course, everybody knows that. Let me just read a little bit further. Well, okay. So in 2021, however, as Reed Pickert and Vince Gold explained at Bloomberg, in 2021, however, as Reed Pickert and Vince Gold explained at Bloomberg, Americans are likely to see price jumps across a variety of sectors next year, thanks in part to COVID-19 vaccines that will potentially turbocharge demand for such pandemic casualties as travel and tickets to sporting events. A moderate level of inflation occurs naturally in growing economies. Hyperinflation, which is usually defined as inflation above 50%, is destructive to an economy. In recent years, hyperinflation has destroyed the economies of Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Argentina. The nature of the inflation being discussed for the United States in 2021 is 2 to 4%, nowhere near the 438 rate predicted for Venezuela for 2021. Some people hear the word inflation and panic, but there's no need for that. And according to Pickert and Gold, one critical ingredient will be missing to sustain higher inflation: a tight labor market. Wages are likely to stay low, which will keep pressure prices too. Inflation can stimulate parts of the economy, as with most things, especially when it comes to finance. Inflation is good for some people and not for others. Moderate inflation has plenty of economic benefits. Higher prices encourage businesses to invest and expand. Interest rates go up, so banks start paying interest, checking accounts again, and higher wages which will indeed come to certain sectors of the labor market, will give workers an incentive to spend money. So just, again, pointing towards the different effects of inflation, and they're saying it will be at least a small increase, and also just talking about raising wages, which will allow workers to spend more. So yeah, it's just natural for the inflation to occur and the cost of living to go up. It's just wages have been stagnant since the 80s. So that's why people are really pushing for a $15 minimum wage. But that minimum wage is going to come in 2025. So yeah, I understand there, you can't just do it overnight, but still we can't just wait till 4 years. Besides, that's after the next election. So that's essentially them saying, yeah, we're going to get it again. So who cares? Yeah, we're going to do 2025. That's how I at least perceive that. So yeah, so we'll have to see with the inflation and just keeping up with it. But, we'll have to deal with that. The spending of certain prices, food essentially, will probably go up. Yeah, just hyperinflation in general. But we also have to see with other proposals about the stimulus checks, right? It's supposed to be $2,000, but then of course this is what I keep saying about the Democrats. They're going to find a way to weasel out. So they were saying $2,000 immediately, especially with the Georgia election, and now they're backpedaling off of that, and they're saying, oh, even Bernie Sanders. This is what I'm trying to say. The Democrats will never be a vessel for true socialism. That they are just playing along. Okay, all right, $1,400. Of course, any check at this point would help, but they're just delusional. They're so disconnected. They really have no idea how people are struggling. What that will last at best a month, and then they're gonna need it again. It's just, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's just, anyway, because I don't want to get too worked up. At the very least, because I did file my taxes, so at least I'll have my return coming in as well. I do qualify for the supposed threshold that they were originally going to have, but then reading from NBC, they're going to have it for individuals earning up to $75,000 per year and their dependents, and then $2,800 for married couples earning up to $150,000. So, and again, they're also adding the adult dependents. So again, at least they're trying to get as many people in. But yeah, I don't know when they're going to make the vote. I know with this whole impeachment trial, they're going to still wait around and just be oh, well, I guess that's done. And then just, go for a recess, I guess. So as though people don't need this check right now. It's just, I don't get it. Of course, it's just straight incompetence. But yeah, people really need help, and these guys are just waiting around and sitting around. Let me read further with this CNBC article. Right. So, quote, the stimulus payment phases out between $75,000 and $100,000 in AGI for individuals, and between $150,000 and $200,000 for couples filing jointly. Heads of households will get the full amount if they earn up to $112,000, and it will phase out completely at $150,000. Adult dependents previously excluded from receiving stimulus checks are eligible for the third round under the House plan, which includes, this includes many college students, disabled adults, and elderly Americans who are claimed on someone else's tax returns. So what that means is that these people had missed out on $1,800 And there are still people who did qualify and still didn't get paid. I'm lucky that I got paid twice, but it's just like they'll do anything that they can to not give you their money. It's your money, or our money, I should say. Like, they'll do anything that they can to weasel out, and then they're surprised when people will call them out. And anyway, right. Many households will get significantly more money under this framework than they did in the first two rounds. For example, a two-parent household with an 18-year-old dependent that met the income eligibility requirements would have received $2,400 in the first round. Now they could get $4,200. The House is reportedly working on other parts of the relief package, which is expected to closely mirror the $1.9 trillion plan President Joe Biden released in January. This version of the bill will be voted on by the House Ways and Means Committee this week. So this was released February 8th. So I'm not exactly sure where they're going with that, but again, it's gonna take some time. They're just so slow. They're so slow, and people are literally starving in this country. Again, it's like a let them eat cake moment. It's just like, well, why can't you just start a business? Like, it's that same mentality. Like, it's unbelievable. But again, I don't want to get too worked up. I'm a bit mellow today. This cloudy, dreary, winter February day is kind of got me mellowed out. So that's why I'm kind of talking a bit low. But I don't want to get too excited. But we have that, at least with the income thresholds and the other proposals with the stimulus. That is going to take weeks, maybe a month or so to get out. But we also have... Okay, and before I go off that note, I also wanted to add about the eviction moratoriums. Apparently, they keep just pushing it back, so now it's like March 31st. So I think this is going to be a continuing trend where they're going to reach the day and they're going to realize, oh, fuck, we can't. We just got to keep pushing the day. And it's like, hey, why don't you just, have no evictions, right? These landlords can just fuck off, and then the state owns these houses. Or, yeah, it's just the solution, right? Of course, is communism, or I don't know what else you want to say, but it's just we know how to fix it, but because there's no immediate profit to whatever corporation or billionaire, they're not going to do it. So it's unbelievable. It's asinine. It's just incompetence. Anyway, so continuing. So we have those things to contend with. And then we also have these proposals of a $50,000 cancellation of federal student debt for each student, which was originally under the original plan was $10,000, but I think they got some real leverage here because it has the backing of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Elizabeth Warren. So these are some pretty significant Chuck Schumer's behind it. So that means it's going to have some real power, at least in Congress. And yeah, I mean, $50,000 for some people, that's barely even half of what they owe in student debt. So luckily for myself, I only have $40,000. So who knows? It's a wild thought, but maybe they'll refund the $10,000. I don't know. Definitely not, but it would be nice at least to get paid the $10,000 anyway. So yeah, we have this proposal of the $50,000 debt forgiveness, and reading from CBS, they're just talking about how this resolution was introduced in press conference and has all these different backings, and they're basically saying, or I'll just read, quote, "The coalition of progressive Democrats argue the Higher Education Act of 1965 gives the White House the authority to cancel the debt without having to use the congressional action." So the president can just do it. Biden can just do it right now, and he's not doing it. And he can do a lot of things right now, which he's going to say, well, I don't know if I have the constitutional authority. Yes, you do. So do it. And of course, he's not. He's not going to do it because he's a Republican. So yeah, again, canceling $50,000 would free up so much. People could actually see the possibility of paying off their debt in their lifetime if 50,000 was canceled off. Like, that's how that's how under the water these people are. So yeah, Warren is saying at least, it could cost up to $650 billion. And that's nothing compared to like our military spending. Or just we can do it. But again, the Democrats, they just drag their feet and they're like, well, I don't know if So they're pretty much just talking about different proposals and how this would help with economics, or just cancel the whole debt, and tax, corporate taxes and such. So but that's at least what I wanted to talk about with basically just economic relief and our stagnation or delayed relief, because a lot of people are under the water and they're still drowning, and they think that the $1,400 that they're going to give out is enough. Like, they really don't understand. And then we're going to be right back here having this conversation of, well, we gave you guys $1,400, maybe it should be $900, maybe $600 again. Like, they really don't. Yeah. And so, I mean, the 100 days, of course, we have had executive actions or executive orders that have been substantial. I mean, now we're back in the climate agreement. Again, it's really just trying to overturn all the damage that Trump did, but the damage has just been done. And so we're just having to clean up the mess. But yeah, people are just saying like, oh, it's only been X amount of weeks. Hey, stop trying to make him, do something that he could do, like literally snap his fingers. Soon enough, it's going to be, hey, it's only been 6 months, come on. You honestly expect him, he's going to, legalize marijuana in 6 months? Like, so anyway, he's going to find a way to weasel out. He's going to try to, not to live up to any promises. And, this is the point that a lot of people were making about, say, like, forced to vote. Like, if you don't pressure them, if you don't threaten their position, they're not going to do it. They're not your friends. So, again, I'll never, like, be ashamed for not voting for Biden. Like, that I understand that Joe Jorgensen is not exactly, like, a friendly socialist person. But again, this whole election was single issue for me on the Second Amendment. And I purely voted because she said that she's in favor of abolishing the ATF, which I'm just like, okay, well, that's a pretty radical position. I'm here for it. So, yeah, again, this was a joke of an election. So my vote, I treated it as a joke. I'm being serious. Like, I just didn't care. But anyway, so we have all that different COVID, stimulus relief, evictions, stuff to contend with. And then we also have this news from Nevada, or at least a proposed law that would allow corporations, tech companies, whatever you want to call them, to form essentially their own local government. So we are literally going to have the technocratic, cyberpunk, feudal societies that, have been predicted for so long. I'm reading this from KCRA, so this is a bit of a local station, but they're reporting from Carson City, and they're writing, quote, planned legislation to establish new business areas in Nevada would allow technology companies to effectively form separate local governments. Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak announced a plan to launch so-called innovation zones in Nevada to jumpstart the state's economy by attracting technology firms, Las Vegas Review-Journal reported Wednesday. The zones would permit companies with large amounts of land to form governments carrying the same authorities as counties, including the ability to impose taxes, form school districts and courts, and provide government services. The measure to further economic development with the alternative form of local government has not yet been planned. The measure to further economic development with the alternative form of local government has not yet been introduced in the legislature. The The measure to further economic development with the alternative form of local government has not yet been introduced in the legislature. Sisolak pitched the concept in his State of the State address delivered January 19th. The plan would bring in new businesses at the forefront of groundbreaking technologies without the use of tax abatements or other publicly funded incentive packages that previously helped Nevada attract companies like Tesla Inc. Sisolak named Blockchains LLC as a company that had committed to developing a smart city in an area east of Reno after the legislation has passed. The draft proposal said the traditional local government model is inadequate alone to provide the resources to make Nevada a leader in attracting and retaining businesses and fostering economic development in emerging technologies and industries. The governor's Office of Economic Development would oversee applications for the zones, which would be limited to companies working in specific business areas, including blockchain, autonomous technology, the Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence, wireless, biometrics, and renewable resource technology. Zone requirements would include applicants owning at least 78 square miles, 202 square kilometers of undeveloped, uninhabited land within a single county, but separate from any city, town, or tax increment area. Companies would have at least $250 million in plans to invest. Companies would have at least $250 million in plans to invest an additional $1 billion in their zones over 10 years. The zones would initially operate with the oversight of their location counties, but would eventually take over county duties and become independent governmental bodies. The zones would have 3-member supervisor boards with the same powers as county commissioners. The businesses would maintain significant control over board membership. The governor's economic development office did not respond to questions about the zones Wednesday. So, yeah, again, right now it's a proposal, but they already got the plan to just push through and build away. And yeah, I mean, we're going to see like a real-life night city in Nevada in the middle of the desert. Just imagine for a moment getting pulled over like the Tesla police or the Google police. Just, there's like some real ANCAP stuff here. So, we'll have to see. And it's going to be very interesting what kind of technologies that they put there. I mean, I could literally see like Chinese state level surveillance and police presence. So who knows what it'll turn into. But again, it's pretty wild that we're heading into this direction and really just cementing the neo-feudal aesthetic that we have in this society as we decline further and further. I mean, like, it's pretty much no secret that this country is owned by corporations, but now the corporations are like going to physically have a government. So that's pretty interesting. So yeah, that's what's happening in Nevada. And before I continue on, just shifting away really to more of a, I guess, like personal drama, you can call it, really more concerning AOC's Instagram live video about her coming out about her experiences with the Capitol riots and also with just being a survivor of sexual abuse. And, again, she was more pointing towards like just the manipulation that you see with the Republicans, how they're trying to really like just, hey, forget about the fact we almost tried to kill you. Like, it's the same level of manipulation and just, projection. So, it was just interesting to see her coming out like that and her being a bit emotional and just, being real for a moment. I know I've kind of talked about her. I'm not like super, it's not that I don't like her personally. I think, she would be a good I'm pretty sure that she's a wonderful human being. It's just as when it comes to politics, I'm not really like just 100% like a celebrity, like, just fawning over every word. I certainly don't think like a celebrity, like influencer politicians and politics is going to bode well in the future, because people are just going to look for looks and the aesthetic and not the actual like policy behind it. So who knows? But besides that, because I do think that she has good intentions, and I do consider her at least the best ally that we got for the moment. Again, I just wanted her to be a little more tougher when it came to the force of vote thing. But then again, I guess you just have to make a compromise and try to weasel her way, or I shouldn't say weasel, just try to work her way within this whole system. Because really, you realize that a lot of these politicians is not necessarily that they don't want to make any bold actions. It's just that the machine is so powerful that their careers will be ruined if they move against it. So they have to be strategic and find other ways to get their policies and agenda through. Because it's politics, and you have to compromise. Unfortunately, you're working with some pretty corrupt human beings, so you're gonna have to make a lot of, not only corrupt but powerful. So you're the one who's gonna have to make concessions, because you just gotta wait till they die, and then hopefully you can replace them and actually make some leverage there. But at least we got Bernie Sanders in the committee chairman position with the budget, and they're still having talks about Neera Tanden. And again, with some of this minutia of specific committees and chairman positions, I haven't necessarily been keeping up with that because it's a lot to take in. But at the very least, though, with AOC coming out with her stories, it's been more just, I guess, her reliving that trauma, and and then of course other people have come out about their trauma as well. So it's heartfelt. So it's a humanizing moment. But then of course you got these conservatives who pounce on any kind of vulnerability, any kind of sensitivity, and they're like, oh well, you see, you weren't even in the building. I don't know, just all this stuff, and just trying to I guess laugh at her for being scared. Haha, you thought you were gonna die. Like the whole Steven Crowder with his tweet with the whole seize the means of reproduction. I'm just like what's the joke? That wasn't even funny. He it wasn't meant, and it's not meant to be funny. It's meant to be a signal to other misogynists and chuds that haha, woman bad, or I don't know. It's so fucking weird. I look at my Twitter, and go ahead and follow my Twitter, Collapse Talk Pod. But I know I post some cringe every once in a while, but at least I know it's cringe. Crowder actually thinks that was fuck, I nailed it. He actually thinks that. It's kind of sad, but then that, and this is the thing about the difference between right-wing podcasting and left-wing podcasting, because left-wing podcasting, you actually know what you're talking about, and people are going to dissect and just be like, well, you see, you were just ad hoc and strawman, yeah. And so with conservative is just oh, I hate black people. Yes, yeah, all right. So it's just so yeah. Of course, they're not saying that directly, but they're being like, man, they're getting uppity. So that's what it's all about. It's really just, yeah. Anyway, this is kind of just drama again. Personal drama of people just trying to distract from the real issues and just trying to point fingers at look at this person. Yeah, don't look at this problem. Yeah, so again, but we had that to deal with, and who knows. So we had AOC coming out with her stories on Instagram, and we also had this impeachment trial, and that's basically just been concluded, acquitted once again, Trump. Which again is kind of predictable, no real surprise there. But it was nice to at least see, just people taking a stand and then presenting their evidence to the court. But yeah, I'm actually curious, did any Democrats vote in favor of Trump being acquitted? Hold on. So the vote was 57-43. Can I see like a list of who acquitted what? Yeah, I can definitely see Joe Manchin voting in favor. Hold on. Yeah. So with Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Angus King of Maine, who are two centrist members of the Senate Democratic Caucus, telling CNN there needed to be an equal number of witnesses on both sides. That meant that the trial could be delayed for an indefinite period, perhaps weeks. The concern was that the Trump team could try to call witnesses like Pelosi and put them in awkward positions. Yeah, again, I didn't really pay attention to this as much, so I'm just reading this in passing. But again, I just don't care. I really don't care about any of this. I will say it was nice to see Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the Virgin Islands, homegirl from St. Croix, so I got a shout out to her, repping that queen energy. So this is officially a Plaskett simp zone, so don't come at me. So, yeah, but I genuinely don't really care, but it's just what happened, it's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Anyway, so we have his impeachment, but then we also have Joe Biden now, firmly, he's settled in now. It hasn't been 100 days yet, but he's settled in, and he's made some executive orders, some military orders. He rescinded the order of the trans ban in the military, which is good, and just other things. As I said, back in the Paris Climate Accord. Yeah, but we'll just look at the other different orders that he's made. Let me try to go to at least when he came in. So I'm reading this from the Federal Register.gov. So the first opening executive orders he made. So Executive Order 13985, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through federal government. Executive Order 13986, ensuring a lawful, accurate enumeration and appointment pursuant to the decennial census. Executive Order 13987, organizing and mobilizing the United States federal government to provide a unified and effective response to combat COVID-19 and to provide United States leadership on global health and security. So just other different COVID measures, and the Order 13991, protecting the federal workforce and requiring mask wearing. Further, just different things. So 14004, enabling all qualified Americans to serve their country in uniform, which is the trans ban revocation. Tackling the climate crisis, 14008. So different orders, just different things. And also now he's signed an order 14014, blocking property with respect to the situation in Burma. So he's ordering sanctions on Burma, which is nice. And he's done a lot so far. Again, nothing about student debt cancellation or descheduling marijuana. Again, we'll have to see. But at the very least, he's overturned some of the more damning orders that Trump has made. But so we can look at that, at the very least with Biden, making orders. But then we also have the Pentagon and how they're addressing supposed extremism within the ranks, which certainly has been an issue. As we saw with the Capitol riot, there was ex-military people in the ranks, and certainly there were insiders within the National Guard or the police that were delaying or just trying to not actually be mobilized. So I'm reading this from Redditors.com, and they're saying that the Pentagon is ordering a stand down for 60 days to just examine and interview officers, or just to at least address the extremism issues that they've had recently. So I'll read a quote. The U.S. military on Wednesday acknowledged it was unsure about how to address the white nationalism and other. The United States on Wednesday acknowledged it was unsure how to address white nationalism and other extremism in its ranks, and announced plans for military-wide stand-downs, pausing regular activity at some point in the next 60 days to tackle the issue. The decision to hold a stand-down was made by Lloyd Austin, who made history by becoming the military's first black defense secretary after a long career rising in the ranks of the Army. In his confirmation hearing, Austin underscored the need to rid the military of racists and extremists. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Austin ordered the stand-down after a meeting with the U.S. military branch leaders who are under pressure to show progress in combating extremism after current and former military servicemen were found to have participated in the siege of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The Pentagon has yet to define how it will deal with extremism or offer data estimating how many service members hold white nationalist ideology. The Pentagon has yet to define how it will deal with extremism or offer data estimating how many service members hold white nationalist ideologies. It has also not disclosed how many troops have been disciplined for extremism. We don't know how we're going to be able to get after this in a meaningful, productive, tangible way, and that is why he had this meeting today, and that is why he certainly ordered the stand-down, Kirby told reporters. It was unclear whether the announcement was meant to foreshadow any near-term concrete actions by President Joe Biden's Pentagon, or whether the stand-down was more of a symbolic move meant to demonstrate Austin's acknowledgement of the problems and continued resolve. The Pentagon did not define whether stand-downs pausing regular activity across the U.S. military might last minutes or hours, or what commanders would do during that time to express opposition to extremism. The announcement came as mourners filed beneath the U.S. Capitol dome to pay tribute to Brian Sicknick, the Capitol police officer who died from injuries sustained during January 6. The assault on the building led to the second impeachment of former President Trump, who spoke at a rally in his final days in office and urged supporters to go to the Capitol and fight. His impeachment trial in the Senate for inciting the siege is scheduled for next week, and which has been acquitted. So they're just ordering a stand down. I can certainly see some conservative, like Gina Carano type, Temple type, like, oh, you see, this is a purge, and they're coming for you now, and they're gonna make you. This is 1984. It's just. Who knows how they will question people. I'm sure they already know who's a bit radical on the far right white nationalist ideologies. But yeah, the military is certainly a hotbed for white nationalism. So how many different ex-military guys are training neo-Nazi paramilitary units? So, and also just not only the extremism of white nationalism, but there's a whole bunch of gangs, and you hear reports of military working with the cartels and human trafficking. There's definitely corruption and criminality in the military, but right now they're going to try to address white nationalism, and I certainly see that it's going to be difficult to root out. Unfortunately, the military has just been a place for these far right people to go and travel to different parts of the world and kill brown people. So yeah, I still distinctly remember a whole bunch of guys who are now in the military, and they were in class talking about, I can't wait to kill me some sand N-words. It's a whole different level, and they were just saying it out loud like nobody was gonna say anything, and nobody did, because these guys were fucking insane and bullies. But they're, if you watch the film or the miniseries, HBO miniseries Generation Kill, you see where the roots of that white racism, fuck yes, kill some Hajis, that type of shit. Which again, you're watching it as a movie, a show. It's just like you laugh at it because you're like, these guys are fucked up, but that's what they thrive in combat and war. So who knows? I guess there are psychos. So even though they're fighting an imperialist war, but anyway, it's just the question of having to root them out, and also how do you deal with them in civilian life with the knowledge that they have. It's certainly a tough question of how do we deal with this, but yeah, we have that stand down, and they are going to start interviewing people, and we'll see how they reform and deal with extremism in the ranks. It's certainly interesting now to see the dynamic with, like, say, the army. Talk with different people who have been through basic and their experiences, and how they're saying, like, well, you see, now they got rid of shark attack, and now they're getting a little soft, and yeah, I don't know. It's certainly like something to have to think about. Like, if I'm drafted, what branch am I going to go into? Well, honestly, I probably wouldn't make the physical requirements, and I actually I think I have flat feet. Like, my feet are a bit fucked up, so I might be able to avoid a draft. But still, a part of me says Marine Corps because they're fucking badass and crazy. But then you say, oh well, the Army, at least it's a bit easier. I don't know. Again, it's all tough. I wouldn't last a second, but yeah. Anyway, enough with the military and the Pentagon. We'll just move on, and we'll talk about the coronavirus strain, UK strain, and its rapid growth. I mean, this is far more contagious, although they are saying that the vaccine should be able to cover, the antibodies there, but still, it's still the worst. Like, we're in the worst case scenario, and people are dying by the thousands, like 9/11 levels every day, and I don't even know where the death toll is now, but we're definitely going to get past 500,000, and it's no end in sight. Yeah. So, yeah, effectively, it's doubling. They're just pointing towards this increase in cases and deaths, and I mean, we're in for a ride. A lot of folks are, around me saying, well, you're so alone. Why don't you come around anymore? I'm like, dude, like, somehow, for whatever reason, y'all keep getting sick. And y'all don't believe me when I say that it's not getting better. Like, it's like when people, like, are fucking up this much in this kind of pandemic, which honestly isn't the worst case scenario. Like, it really tells me, like, what would happen if it was like a zombie apocalypse? Like, I don't think they would last a second. Like, they would certainly line up for the FEMA camps or whatever. Like, so, yeah, man, like, it's not that I don't want to help out. When people aren't taking the steps to, like, really help themselves to a certain point, you just got to start looking out for your own preservation. And it also speaks to, like, okay, if you want me to help, I'm not in any position to help at the moment. And if I look out for myself, I can at least be in the position later on to help out, or I guess I'm just saying it wrong. But yeah, I'm just dealing with a lot. I'm dealing with a lot. But, again, a lot of people are getting hopium about the pandemic and about the vaccine. And then you read stuff about this and saying, like, oh, the new strain is 35 to 45% more transmissible. Now they're saying double-layered mask. Like, so we're really in for the long haul with this disease, and it's going to continue to mutate, I bet. And, it's going to be a continuing strain on people's mental health and their abilities to cope with just these conditions. And as I pointed earlier, I mean, people are, with the Pennsylvania shooting, people are just on edge, and they're going to continue to get these strains. And then you also have the financial pressures because there's no real relief happening. And then we still have hyperinflation to contend with. But yeah, again, I could be very wrong about this, and the vaccine is starting to be rolled out. It's just fascinating to me that the Trump administration they completely botched it, just so we would have a rough start with this new administration, which I believe is also grounds for impeachment. But we all know that we all know how that turns out. So yeah. With that being said, the UK strain is just something we have to keep an eye on. And as I pointed out, also we just had the Super Bowl, which is a super spreader event, and we'll see how things transpire throughout the week. But again, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And yeah, we're just going to have to watch this unfold in horror. Or at the very least, if you know how this is going to happen, you just got to self-isolate and just hope to not get sick. So, yeah. So that's the UK strain. And before I wrap up with this whole general domestic field, I did want to talk about, at least with certain like pop, or I shouldn't say pop culture, just, this film that came out, right? The Hillbilly Elegy on Netflix, which I haven't watched. I've just been seeing like different pieces about it and reviews. And it certainly seems like one of those films of where it's like the cliched film where you got rich Hollywood types trying to, document, how normal people live and, the degradation, this is a community in crisis. Like, it's one of those movies, but I think it's fairly well made. Again, I haven't seen it, so I can't give a review, but I would like to see it, and, reviews are, at least hopeful. But it's interesting to see how this memoir from the child, J.B. Vance, or he's a man now, so of his childhood, and just seeing the environment that he grew up in and how this is just a result of generations of economic disparity, of mental health problems, alcohol, drug addiction. I mean, this is pretty much just the backdrop of the opioid crisis, right? And, the Rust Belt, Appalachian communities in decline. And it's just, it really speaks to how these communities, how they've been taken advantage of, taken a ride for, and then when they, have nowhere to turn to, the politician comes around and say, man, yeah, we had to close down. I mean, not that we had to close down. We just hired, not that we hired, it's just, these damn Mexicans, they just keep driving, like, so they have the racial animus of, oh, it's them. These outsiders are coming in here and we're hiring them for cheap, but they're just taking all the jobs. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, because if it wasn't for the white supremacy, if it wasn't for the anti-intellectualism, if it wasn't for the religious fundamentalism, like, the South would be a nice place to live. I wouldn't mind living here. But we have all these things, the white supremacy, fundamentalism, anti-intellectualism, and this just doesn't seem like a place I want to stay in. Like, I don't want to fucking live here. I don't want to be here. I need to escape Texas. Escaped in Texas. Which, I turn back to the Dogecoin plans that I have. If it pays off, like, I could actually, like, leave and start a new life somewhere. Because there's nothing for me in Texas, really. Like, I can't stay here. I'm sorry. But anyway, so that was interesting to see that movie, at least the portrayal of these communities and families in despair and in decline, a culture in decline. And, it's something that it struck a chord with me because it's something that I deeply relate to in terms of dysfunctional families and trauma, generational trauma, mental health issues, and addiction problems. Like, it's something that my family is certainly struggling with. And, I look to the history of not just my family, but my people and the socioeconomic conditions that give rise to a lot of the problems that we have. Because believe me, like, I could sit here all day and talk about the problems within our culture, Dominican culture, but that's for another time. And yeah, I mean, imagine that. Imagine those conditions in Hillbilly Elegy, struggling with alcohol problems, abuse, physical abuse, mental health problems. and family dysfunctional families, all this stuff. And imagine that, but for 500 years, because essentially you can consider the contact of Spaniards with the native peoples of Hispaniola the start of Dominican history and culture. So just all that madness for 500 years, and then with my family, within a generation, we were able to escape that poverty. Because I always try to hone in the fact that like literally 2 generations ago we were in the Stone Age. I mean, we had, of course, like not literally like primitive, but like as close as you can get, really. And within a generation, my grandmother came to the United States. She got lucky working with some generous people who funded my father through private school. So again, we only got lucky because of, the goodwill of some very wealthy people. But yeah, it's just we escaped the financial issues and the socioeconomic problems, but we still had the mental health and dysfunction and all that good stuff. So, and again, my family isn't nearly as dysfunctional as what Vance had to go through, but it's still a reflection of it, and still something that I can definitely relate with. So, yeah, it's so much that I almost, on occasion, because when I think about dating and starting my own family, it's like it's scary because like I don't want to repeat that cycle, and it gets to a point where like I might as well just not date and start a family. I mean, that's the most surefire way to break that cycle. But of course, I would like to start a family, even with all this dreary collapse extinction bullshit. Like, it would still be nice to have people surrounding me in my last days, or something. I don't know. Sometimes our biology just takes over us, So, yeah, it would be nice to have little versions of me running around. But yeah, anyway, I just hope that if that did happen, I would be able to, create an environment for them where they can actually grow to be functional human beings that can maintain a decent functional relationship. Because I have a lot of my antisocial issues because of the type of instability in my upbringing. But anyway, not trying to get too deep, but it's just the way it is. But that's what I wanted to say, at least with the domestic area. And now we're going to move into the international field with the, just different events around the world. And I wanted to touch up on the coup in Myanmar that was underway the beginning of February. And yeah, this military junta, called out a fraudulent, quote unquote, fraudulent election, and have placed Aung San Suu Kyi in under house arrest. And now we've definitely seen protests and clashes, and soon enough there's going to be riots of some kind. Again, we saw sanctions against the junta government. So yeah, this is certainly a flashpoint. We'll see how it unfolds in Southeast Asia. But yeah, it's just another blip in the collapse radar of how things will unfold. But I'm going to read from CNN about just the whole situation to elaborate on it. So, quote, Myanmar's new military junta, which overturned the results of democratic elections when it seized power last Monday, has warned the public not to destroy democracy following 4 days of protest. In a statement on the government-run MRTV channel, the military warned that democracy can be destroyed without discipline, and that people who harm the state's stability, public safety, and the rule of law could face legal action. The warning came as 2 people were seriously injured in the capital on Tuesday after police officers allegedly shot at protesters, according to the political party of deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi. A young man sustained a gunshot wound to the chest, and another woman was hit in the head by a bullet that pierced a motorcycle helmet. National League for Democracy NLD party spokesperson Chi To said in a Facebook post on Tuesday afternoon. To said that a doctor had confirmed the female victim was currently in critical condition and would need to be placed on a ventilator. The doctor said the wound was from a real bullet, not a rubber bullet. Quito said the police and military in Myanmar have not issued any statements regarding the protests in the country. On Tuesday, the government imposed new restrictions on public gatherings and instituted a curfew for major towns and cities across the country, including the capital and the largest city, Yangon. Or the capital is I can't even say that, I'm sorry. But their largest city, which is separate, is Yangon. So there's two major cities under curfew, continuing, where large protests are ongoing. According to a new notice published by state-owned newspaper The Global New Light of Myanmar, people are prohibited from gathering in groups of more than 5, restricted from joining protest marches on foot or by car, and are not allowed to make public speeches in public areas. A curfew will be in place from 8 p.m. until 4 a.m. in most major cities and towns. While the notice said it came into force on February 8th, it did not say when restrictions would lift. At least 27 people were arrested during protests in Mandalay, the country's second largest city, Reuters reported Tuesday. The report said that 2 local media organizations confirmed the arrest, which included a journalist for the Democratic Voice of Burma, who said they were detained after filming police violence against protesters. Tens of thousands of people have taken part in protests against the February 1st coup, despite a long history of brutal crackdowns by the military and threats to use live ammunition against demonstrators. Those arrested could face prosecution under Section 144 of the Criminal Code for unlawful assembly. Section 144 has been used in the past as a way to stop lawful protests and to justify violent crackdowns on mass demonstrations. So, yeah, they're having these protests, and there's a bit of a movement and resistance from the population. And then the UN and the United States are condemning this, so it is interesting. Although now whenever I see like the UN or the US condemning something like this, I'm just thinking to myself, is this because they can't control the junta or what? Because it's never really about freedom. It's usually like, okay, are these guys like helping us, or are they on our team? So I'm just curious as to what allegiances the Myanmar junta has. I don't necessarily think that they're close with China, but who knows? Maybe they could ally together out of necessity. Who knows? I really don't know that dynamic, but it is interesting to see that, because you see this coup attempt from the Myanmar military, where the United States and the UN is saying unequivocally, well, this is wrong and we're against this and we want democracy preserved. But then you have in Haiti, which is another ongoing situation, rapidly evolving. It's also experiencing election issues and coup attempts, and you hear crickets from the media, because like the media was all over the Myanmar coup, but then you hear nothing about Haiti right now, which is it's in a severe crisis, really. And I'm reading from The Nation, and they're pointing out, or they have the headline saying Haiti, too many presidents, too little of everything else. So there are like 3 claimants. I'm using like Crusader King terms. There are 3 pretenders to the seat of the presidency, and this article is fascinating because it highlights just the whole corruption of, just decline of Haiti and the corruption of the government, and also from the UN peacekeepers that have intervened there, and just in general, just the conditions that normal people have to go through in Haiti are just horrendous. I mean, they have severe kidnapping issues now, where just gangs are just kidnapping and blackmailing people. And also, I did not read this at all, because they were pointing to just the actions of gangs and enforcement of this president who's named Moise. In fact, you know what? Let me just read, right? So, quote, Haiti has now 3 presidents, or it did as of last night. Unfortunately, all of this has transpired against the backdrop of what should have been the joyous 35th anniversary of the fall of the de Villiers dictatorship, a 29-year rule of terror that ended on February 7th, 1986, when the scion of the Duvalier dynasty, Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier, was ousted by a combination of popular unrest, international pressure, and developing anti-authoritarian attitudes around the globe. But the 35 years since Duvalier was forced out have done little to free Haiti from its history of foreign meddling and domestic corruption. And that's without mentioning the extra added destruction wrought by several catastrophic hurricanes called into being by a changing climate, a killer cholera epidemic brought in by UN peacekeeping forces, and one hugely destructive earthquake. Let's look at what's happening now in Haiti. There's an elected president in office who has totally lost any support he ever had among the people of Haiti. Why has President Jovenel Moïse, a former banana producer and auto parts salesman, been so roundly rejected? Because under his rule, the cost of living has risen, poverty has hardened, unemployment has grown. In a country where the cost of living is always too high for the earnings of families, where poverty is endemic, and where unemployment is the norm. Beyond that, Moïse's lax and irresponsible rule has engendered a state of grotesque insecurity. Kidnappings are a way of life, a business for gangs, who kidnap and kill with impunity, as if perhaps they were a part of an unstated government policy. There are heavily armed and organized. They've committed at least 2 large massacres in neighborhoods where opposition against Moïse is strong, killing men, women, and children and babies. That's not to say that on occasion a few gangsters have not been arrested. A few have been, and not all of the many gangs operating in Port-au-Prince are pro-Moïse. The whole situation is one where you or I would not let our children out of the house or even go out ourselves if we could help it. Some kids have just not been able to go to school in the past week since many schools have closed, not because the government has been deeply concerned about the spread of COVID, but because street insecurity is too high and children are at risk. And I wanted to also point to the massacre that they're mentioning, right? Because I don't think I read this, which is a pretty fucking insane incident. So they're calling it the La Saline massacre, right? So the La Saline massacre, which occurred in Haiti on November 13th, rivals the crimes of the Duvalier dictatorship and of military regimes that seized power after Duvalier failed. 59 people, including children as young as 3 years old, were murdered in La Saline in a premeditated slaughter. Only the Jean Rebelle massacre, perpetrated in 1987 by the regime of Henri Namphy, with support of Tonton Makutis, has involved more deaths. La Saline is a poor neighborhood in Port-au-Prince, described by PBS as a place where people cook over open fires in alleyways so narrow that 2 people can't pass without touching shoulders. The Saint Jean Bosco Church of Jean-Bertrand Aristide was in La Saline, and recent protests against government corruption have found support there. It is located on the other side of a canal from the former Fort de Manche prison where the Duvaliers tortured and murdered thousands of people. La Saline also houses a commercial port with 3 terminals in Croix des Bossals, a market that sells produce from the country to restaurants, wholesalers, and supermarkets. Early press reports blame the killings on gang fighting over control of the market. Yeah, so there's a pretty insane massacre that occurred, but this, apparently is a government-backed action of these gangs and death squads, and yeah. So effectively, this is they're saying, with this anniversary of Duvalier's ousting, that they're right back where they started, and yeah, this new president is pretty corrupt and criminal, and you're reading on further. They also say he basically just has suspended the parliamentary proceedings. Right, so, quote, under Moïse, the 2 houses of the legislature have been dissolved. He has not managed to call new legislative elections, and since January 2020, he has been ruling by decree. When mayors have reached the end of their term, Moïse has simply named their successors. Journalists and human rights advocates have been threatened and attacked. As former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide wrote to me right before the tumultuous weekend, in order to maintain the status quo and the system of social exclusion, Haitian elites have always rejected the democratic principle that demands that government organize free, honest, and transparent elections. So yeah, unfortunately, just corruption has just been a thing there. But yeah, I'm gonna go down because this is a pretty lengthy article, but they talk about the different pretenders and the different claimants of basically Haiti right now has 3 governments. So back to our trifecta of Haitian presidents. Over the weekend, the divided opposition installed 2 separate presidents in 2 separate modest ceremonies. One is interim president Jean-Louis, another Supreme Court judge appointed to preside over the country until elections can be held, and still unarrested as this goes to press, though arguably no longer a judge since Morsi fired him. The other is Karl Heinz Charles, a lawyer who was inaugurated in Cape Haitien in Haiti's north, and who will, his supporters claim, make the new seat of the Haitian government the old revolutionary palace of Sans Souci, built by King Henry Christophe, also in the north, thus resurrecting one of the oldest enmities in Haiti, the competition for preeminence between Cape Haitien and Port-au-Prince, north and south. No interim is mentioned in the Charles announcement, and it has a secessionist flavor. Yeah, so they're gearing up for some craziness and unrest, and I'm just interested what the international response will be, because as I said, we saw with the Myanmar protests and coup that the UN and the US are condemning the military actions of the junta. But then with this whole debacle with Haiti, the US is with Morsi, so they're basically backing a criminal president. I mean, they did the same thing with Duvalier. I mean, they supported him. So yeah, they have the hand everywhere. But it's just gonna be interesting how things unfold and just what they're going to do, because ultimately they're supporting Morsi because it's a ploy to further isolate Venezuela, and yeah, you're going to see a lot of actions against Venezuela. I feel like tensions are going to certainly ratchet up with this new administration. But anyway, we have this situation in Haiti, and unfortunately with Haiti, it's effectively the Somalia of the Caribbean. And yeah, it could get bad. I mean, there could be some serious piracy problems, as this continues on. And, especially it's close to home for myself because it's quite literally right next to my homeland. And if things get really bad, it's going to be serious refugee problems. And, Dominicans already have some serious prejudice against Haitians. I mean, even my parents and some of my older family friends, they have some pretty bigoted views of Haitians, which is just a surprise to me, because every time I've ever met a Haitian, I've treated them like a brother or sister. It's just been in fact it's like a huge relief, because it's oh my, yeah, you have very similar cultures, very similar type of foods and music's. I mean, our cultures are directly influenced through African culture, so makes sense. But yeah, people, they get tribal and they're like, oh, I'm not black because, for Dominicans, black is Haitian. It's really messed up. But I'm just, hoping that this will go ahead smoothly and that there won't be any kind of major unrest or violence, because who knows if there'll be any kind of intervention, and the Dominicans are going to have a role in that. And I also have one of my cousins in the military, so it would just be, yeah, I don't know. Because I'm going to see a very different side of my community if things do get heated, and just the different, tribal and bigoted views that they're going to have with the Haitians. Oh, fuck these, and of course I'm going to have to stand aside and say, look, if we're committing crimes, I can't support it. So, oh, you got to support your people. It's just, yeah, it's, again, I guess racial politics, ethnic conflicts, it's pointless. But anyway, we'll have to see how this unfolds. But that's in Haiti, and I wanted to at least move on from there. And I have been talking about the Indian farmer protests that have been occurring, and they have been escalating. There's just been general silence from the mainstream media, and of course they don't want to cover one of the largest labor protests in history, and farmer protests, and we've seen some significant action from the Indian government, from the police there. I'm reading this at least from Amnesty International, and they are saying, they're basically just calling for this violent behavior to come to an end, saying, quote, the government must stop crushing farmers' protests and demonizing dissenters. Quote, the Indian government must immediately stop its escalating crackdown on protesters, farming leaders, and journalists amid ongoing nationwide demonstrations against 3 recently introduced farm laws. Amnesty International said today the organization also called for the immediate and unconditional release of those arrested solely for peacefully exercising their rights to freedom of expression and peacefully assemble. Rather than investigating reports of violence against protesters and bringing suspected perpetrators to justice, the authorities have resorted to hindering access to protest sites, shutting down the internet, censoring social media, and using draconian laws against protesters who have been peacefully voicing their opposition to the new laws for several months now. So, reading quote, we have seen an alarming escalation in the Indian authorities' targeting of anyone who dares to criticize or protest the government's repressive laws and policies, end quote, from Rajat Kosia, Senior Director of Research, Advocacy and Policy at Amnesty International. And are we further? At least 8 leading journalists and politicians have been charged with sedition after reporting on the farmers' protest. They have been charged with misreporting, spreading disharmony, and inciting riots via their tweets on Republic Day. Mandeep Punia, a freelance journalist of the Caravan, or for the Caravan, was arrested on the evening of January 30th, shortly after the Caravan ran a Facebook Live session in which he reported that the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party had sent activists to attack the protesting farmers, initially accused of obstructing the police, and then of violence. Mandeep Punia was detained for an initial period of 14 days without being allowed to see a lawyer, who was later granted bail. On February 1st, hundreds of Indian Twitter accounts, including those belonging to news websites, activists, and actors, were suspended for more than 12 hours after the government said users were posting content inciting violence due to their using of the hashtag farmers protest. Twitter reversed its decision by the evening. So they're just cracking down on this, social media crackdowns, and just they're really starting to now say, oh, well, they're dissenters, and they're effectively trying to they're slowly trying to set the the stage to call them traitors, and then they're using the pretext of a small group of violent rioters and just cracking down on all the protesters. So it really shows to you that we think that this is a problem here in the United States, and then you see the same behavior everywhere else, and you realize, okay, it might not exclusively be an American problem, although it certainly is a bad one. But this is just a general problem with state repression of police state violence, and certainly it's going to get worse. And I mean, again, you hear nothing from any kind of media about this protest, historic levels of support and just action, and nothing. There are people who generally have no idea that this is happening. So I feel like we're just going to enter, as things start to warm up and this winter dies down. This summer, I feel like we're going to see a huge wave of protests and demonstrations, and in extent maybe riots and violence. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But you can already see already now these demonstrations and unrest unfolding and brewing, and it's just going to keep getting hotter and hotter, both metaphorically, figuratively, but also like literally, with the summer. So we'll see how that affects the behavior of these people. In fact, I've read some theories, at least when it comes to like thermodynamics and like the dynamics of social behaviors and hot environments. Like, I don't know, it's rather interesting, and I'm sure some of y'all know what I'm talking about. But yeah, just seeing the heat, and then how people behave in that heat, and just in general, what that's going to do as things unfold. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot. So that's at least happening in India. Again, underreported, massively underreported. All these issues, right? At least with the Myanmar, that got some coverage, but with Haiti, right, underreported. India protests underreported, and then also we have in Turkey as well. We have student protests against the president Erdogan, and he's already like trying to label these guys, the students, as terrorists and such. And this is like, oh, they're defiling Islam or something like that. So yeah, we'll have to see how this unfolds as well. But I'm reading from Al Jazeera. Over the last month, protests at a university overlooking the Bosphorus have spiraled into a challenge that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has compared with nationwide demonstrations that threatened his government 8 years ago. Student outcry against a government-appointed rector at Bogazici University, one of Turkey's most prestigious, has also spilled into the international arena, jeopardizing Erdogan's efforts to build bridges with the new administration in Washington, D.C., and repair relations with the European Union. Erdogan has been seeking to present a reforming front to the outside world following President Joe Biden's election win, in a bid to smooth over long-standing disputes between Turkey and the United States. However, police brutality and government efforts to demonize the protesters, labeling them terrorists and employing homophobic slurs, has undermined his promises of judicial and democratic reform, when Erdogan's Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu branded demonstrators LGBT deviants. In a tweet on Tuesday, the U.S. State Department condemned anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and voiced concern at the detention of protesters. The EU and the United Nations also condemned homophobic comments and called for demonstrators to be released. The Turkish Foreign Ministry responded by warning certain circles abroad not to intervene in a way that could provoke groups that resort to using illegal means and encourages illegal acts. Erdogan has also hit out at LGBT youth after an art exhibition staged by the protesters included an image of the Kaaba, Islam's holiest site, and the LGBTQ flags. As a Muslim student, my initial reaction was that I didn't want to see that as a part of an exhibition, not because I want to limit freedom of expression, but because all students are a part of the protests, and solidarity among us is too important to sacrifice for any expression, said Ines Sain, a second-year history student at Bogazici. But it's been framed as an attack on Muslims when there wasn't any such intention. Hundreds of protesters have been arrested at the university since January 4th, as well as at demonstrations in support of the students and the LGBTQ rights in cities such as Ankara, Izmir, and Bursa. Residents have demonstrated their support by banging pots and pans from their balconies every evening, a reminder of the 2013 Gezi protests across Turkey that were one of the greatest threats to Erdogan's 18-year rule. So yeah, some massive demonstrations there, youth protests, LGBT rights. So yeah, and, Erdogan is trying to make himself into a sultan, I guess, and this just the fundamentalism starting to rear its head, and making Ataturk proud, right? So yeah, we're gonna have to see how this unfolds. But yeah, he's pretty much trying to say that these students are traitors and terrorists, and they're gonna threaten our way of life. It's really interesting how you hear a lot of these MAGA people talk about Islam and Sharia law and this and that. But then if they could just talk, like, not even say God or Allah, well, although Allah is God, so like that's just, again, it's a language barrier thing. But if they could just talk in English, and the Muslim guy just never says Allah, he says God instead, and just talk about their views, they realize, oh, we have a lot in common, huh? we're more alike than we thought before, So in all the worst ways, actually, they have things in commons. Yeah. So it's curious just the response to this, and not to call out anybody out, but I'm just curious to what Hassan Piker has to say about this. I don't know if he said anything about Erdogan or the Turkish movements currently. But yeah, so we're just going to see how this unfolds. But Turkey is certainly, it's a NATO ally. And Turkey has been making weird moves in Syria and weird moves against Greece. So they're questionable at best. But we need them because of that Bosphorus, and we need that access to the Black Sea. It would be very unlikely to see Russia and Turkey to work together, but who knows, man? I mean, you got two, ambitious, strong men. They could maybe work out a deal. Anything can happen, really. So, yeah, we're going to have to see what this new protest and how it's unfolding. But it's curious, as I mentioned with Russia, we saw these protests against students in Turkey, and we're also seeing protests among young people in Russia over the arrest of Navalny and his sentencing to 3 years in jail. But I'm going to read this from Euronews. Quote, jails in the Russian capital are overcrowded after weeks of protests in support of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Demonstrations have been taking place in cities across the country since Navalny was arrested on his return to Russia last month. Thousands of people have been arrested across the country as police cracked down on what they say were illegal demonstrations. In Moscow, more than 800 people are still being held in vastly overcrowded cells and facilities. A video taken by one detainee shows 28 men crammed inside a holding cell intended for 8 inmates, with no mattresses on the cot and a filthy pit latrine-like toilet. More than 11,000 protesters were reportedly detained across the country during 2 weekends of pro-Navalny rallies last month, and in Moscow and St. Petersburg last week after he was ordered to serve nearly 3 years in prison. In Moscow, jails quickly filled up as hundreds of people were sentenced by the court. Most of the detained were sent to the Sakharovo immigration detention center on the outskirts of the city. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has acknowledged the overcrowding of the detention centers and blamed the problem on the protesters themselves. This situation wasn't provoked by law enforcement, it was provoked by participants of unauthorized rallies, said Peskov. Yeah, so we have that protest there in Moscow over Navalny's expose over Putin's corruption in his palace and just the whole criminal empire that they have in Russia. Well, yeah, so again, we could see this escalating further. As I said, we could see just protests, maybe a wave of protests this summer, like 1968 style. So who knows what could unfold from there. But that's at least the protests that I wanted to cover for now. I did, however, want to cover one last thing concerning Canada and their designation of the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization. And this comes as a result of their actions with the January 6th attack. So I'm reading from New York Times, quote, Canada formally designated the Proud Boys as a terrorist group under its criminal law on Wednesday, a move that could lead to financial seizures and allow police to treat any crimes committed by members as terrorist activity. Government officials said they believe Canada is the first nation to label the Proud Boys as a terrorist entity. The events last month in Washington, they added, contributed to the move, which was already under consideration. Since 2018, we have seen an escalation towards violence in this group. Bill Blair, the public safety minister, told a news conference, adding that the Proud Boys and 12 other groups added to the list on Wednesday are all hateful, intolerant, and, as we've seen, they can be highly dangerous. An official who spoke on the condition that he not be identified said that while information gleaned after the January 6th attack on the Capitol in Washington was a contributing factor, it certainly wasn't the driving force. Members of the Proud Boys, a far-right all-male organization that lauded street brawling as part of its founding idea, played a prominent role in the storming of the United States Capitol. U.S. federal prosecutors investigating the violence announced their first conspiracy charges against the Proud Boys last week, accusing 2 members of coordinating the effort to interfere with law enforcement officers protecting Congress during the final certification of the presidential election. Since the attack, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the opposition New Democratic Party in Canada, has pushed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to declare the Proud Boys a terror group. Officials said the listing was made independently of the politicians. The Proud Boys were among the 13 groups added to the government's terrorism list, including 3 other far-right or neo-Nazi organizations. The other groups added to the list are affiliated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Officials stressed that the designations were unlikely to lead to arrest in the near term. Just because you're listed doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're now going to be charged with a crime, he once said. But the official added that any crimes committed by members of the group can now be the subject of terrorism charges under criminal law. Those potential crimes include providing a terrorist group with funds or assistance, such as purchasing Proud Boys paraphernalia or clothing from the group, although displaying or wearing them publicly breaks no laws. So imagine you're buying a Pepe, tactical Pepe patch from the Proud Boys, and you're effectively committing a grievous federal crime in the Canadian government because you're supplying terrorism. That's funny. Yeah, you can go on. We can go on further, but they're just talking about the different far-right groups that Canada has been dealing with, and this declaration is certainly a significant step. Although it's not like Canada's going to be drone bombing people. Could you imagine that? You're a terrorist in the eyes of the Canadian government, and you're just sitting playing Call of Duty, and a Hellfire missile just hits you. Wow, man. But of course, that would never happen. In fact, it would be more likely that the United States would be drone bombing Canada. Like this, yeah. Anyway, so that happened. And that designation is certainly, of course, the conservative and, they're all just like reading. But yeah, I mean, what else can you say from there? But the Proud Boys certainly had a role to play in that attack. I mean, they're posting it online just unironically, like, yeah, we're going to kill AOC. We're going to rape her. Like, it's fucking insane. Like, yeah. So it's crazy, but we'll have to see what this leads to and how other far-right neo-Nazi groups and paramilitary groups deal with this and how Canada deals with it. Again, Canada is not without their own far-right issues, but it doesn't seem like it's as substantial as it is here, although you still read some pretty bad stories. And, discrimination against the First Nation, Indigenous citizens. Remember that video a while back where this lady is on her deathbed and she's recording the nurses just talking shit. Like, I don't even remember what they were saying, but it was just so grotesque. And she's literally dying, at least, but she's recording these people saying these things about her. And other reports of like these fishermen disputes between communities. So the whites are disputing with the natives because they're competing over fishing. Yeah, so it's crazy that it's still there, like that I guess racism and tribalism, and yeah. So they certainly have to address their own problems, but it's not here, at least in the United States, where we're quite literally the epicenter of white nationalists, white supremacist ideologies. So yeah, yikes. Anyway, but that's Canada and their declaration there. But we'll have to see what this administration does with the Proud Boys. If there is further action, not necessarily from the Proud Boys, but like if just one member goes off the deep end, then yeah, they could certainly designate the entire group. And it's also interesting, I've been reading about Enrique Tarrio saying that he was an informant for the FBI, although he was informing on other groups. So, yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, but that's at least what I wanted to talk about in the international field. And now we'll dive more into the natural world and just, climate events, ecosystems and such, environmental effects. And yeah, we're in a bit of a cold snap, at least in the United States. Here in Texas, we've had a pretty severe, it's not even the worst, honestly. Like we're like, they've actually like canceled work for me on Monday, so, or maybe Tuesday. We'll see how bad it gets. So I'm basically gonna have to hunker down. But luckily I did have my winter preps in order, and I have firewood. So if we lose power, I can definitely start a fire and keep myself warm. I got water and food. Yeah, I'm pretty set. Just to hunker down and just smoke away. I'm going to, do this recording here with this show and edit, and thankfully, God willing, I could do a recording also of the game playthroughs that I've been wanting to get out, that I've been kind of behind on. But yeah, maybe I can just do a quick recording there also. Anyway, just, hunkering in. We'll get some snow here, so it'll be nice to do a snow day. And yeah, I'm not going to drive anywhere, but still, at least enjoy the white snow. But we also had, we had this cold front, the winter storm, but we also had the pile up, the Fort Worth pile up, where 130 cars just smashed into each other, and 18 wheelers just like crushing people. 6 people died and there's injuries, but yeah, that just really shows you how devastating we get in the South over ice and snow. And I remember also that kind of reminds me of what happened in Georgia. Like it was a similar incident in Georgia where it was just the whole city was Atlanta. The whole city was just in chaos because of all the snow and ice, and like literally like cars had exploded. So it's just, yeah, crazy. But yeah, I believe though I have my supplies in order, so I shouldn't be going out anywhere. And if I do have to go out, I'll probably have to make it like a trip that's walking distance. Anyway, so we'll have to see there. Something that happened in the Himalayas that is climate related, because effectively what had occurred was that a glacier burst. There was so what I'm understanding is that there was melting that had occurred, and it was basically a lake inside the glacier, and it eventually burst, and all the water that was in the lake, that was inside the glacier, burst out, and it caused a flash flood that effectively just wiped out entire villages, although enough people were able to escape, but still 150 people died. Yeah, and the videos from that was pretty intense, but again, that's just another effect of the climate change and the melting glaciers there. So there's that. So I did want to also talk about not necessarily this glacier flood, but just something that's more ecological in nature, having to deal with vitamin deficiency in animals and our marine ecosystems. And I'm reading from The Atlantic where they're showing that there is a deficit in thiamine, or vitamin B1, in marine ecosystems and fish populations, and this is also affecting the food chain. Because they released this article, and I remember reading something, I believe also from the Atlantic some years back, about bird populations dying off because of this vitamin deficiency. And so they don't exactly know how humans are affecting it, but it's undoubtedly a cause of human activity, industrial activity. So reading from the Atlantic, quote, disoriented little fish caught the attention of staff members at the Coleman National Fish Hatchery in Red Bluff, California in early January 2020. Looking down into the outdoor tanks called raceways, the facility's employees noticed that among the dark, olive-colored clouds of live fish, there were occasional silver from the undersides of tiny fry that were struggling to swim. These small fish would roll onto their side, sink to the bottom for a moment, spring back up, swim a few strokes, and then roll over again. Many were dying too. While a few hundred mortalities daily in the facility containing millions of fish is normal, something was definitely amiss. Daily mortality was in the thousands, and it didn't go down, said Brett Galian, complex manager at the hatchery. Galian and his team had already hatched and released into the raceways between 6 and 7 million fish, about half of Coleman's annual production, and the prospect of losing many or most of them began to seem very real. Biologists at the California Nevada Fish Health Center, an on-site lab at the hatchery, which is located on the tributary of the Sacramento River, inspected the fish but couldn't make a diagnosis. A few samples were sent to the University of California, Davis, for more testing. Around that time, Galian recalls other salmon hatcheries in the state began reporting unusually high mortality rates in their fish. Whatever was afflicting Coleman's salmon was evidently impacting fish across Northern California. Short of better explanations, Galian and his colleagues grew concerned that a virus was sweeping through their brood. Grasping for ideas as thousands of fish expired each day, they turned to the internet, where they dug up research on nutritional deficiencies in trout from the Great Lakes, as well as Atlantic salmon on the East Coast. Several decades ago, sick and dying fish in these regions had been found to be deficient in thiamine, or vitamin B1, a basic building block of life, critical to the functioning of cells and in converting food into energy. Encouraged by this finding, biologists at the Fish Health Center ran a trial submerging about half of the fry in a bath of water and dissolved thiamine powder. It worked like a charm, Galian says. After several hours, nearly all of the treated fish were behaving normally, while symptoms continued in an untreated control group. Coleman, as well as the other hatcheries, scaled up the treatment and applied it to more than 1 million fry. It did the job in the short term, but it didn't solve the underlying problem, because the fish acquire thiamine by ingesting it through their food, and females pass nutrients to their eggs. The troubling new condition indicated something was amiss in the Pacific Ocean, the last place the fish eat before entering fresh water to spawn. So, yeah, pretty lengthy article, but it's pretty insightful over just this deficiency and how it's affecting the food chain, the food web, and yeah, man, like, this is bad. I mean, this is really bad. So, again, like, we're still unsure how this activity is affecting B1 deficiencies, but it's certainly an alarm bell that needs to be rung as loud as possible. Again, it's just another thing where, like, people read it and it's just depressing, where you're just like, what's the point? Like, this is insurmountable. But regardless, it's just something to figure out, and hopefully something that we can resolve. But yeah, so that's with the fish there and the thiamine deficiencies. And before I wrap up with the before I wrap up with the natural segment, there's been an interesting story about Jamaica, and that they're currently facing
a marijuana shortage. And there's farmers are beginning to struggle. So, and this has to deal with a lot. This has to deal with just a changing climate, weather events, and in a weird way, it also includes COVID restrictions and how that affects small businesses. So, reading from the Associated Press, quote, Jamaica is running low on ganja. Heavy rains followed by an extended drought, an increase in local consumptions, and a drop in the number of marijuana farmers have caused a shortage in the island's famed but largely illegal market that experts say is the worst they've seen. It's a cultural embarrassment, said Tristan Thompson, chief opportunity explorer for Takaya, a consulting brokerage firm for the country's nascent legal cannabis industry. Jamaica, which foreigners have long associated with pot, reggae, and Rastafarians, authorized a regulated medical marijuana industry and decriminalized small amounts of weed in 2015. People caught with 2 ounces or less of cannabis are supposed to pay a small fine and face no arrest or criminal record. The island also allows individuals to cultivate up to 5 plants, and Rastafarians are legally allowed to smoke ganja for sacramental purposes. But enforcement is spotty as many tourists and locals continue to buy marijuana on the street, where it has grown more scarce and more expensive. Heavy rains during last year's hurricane season pummeled marijuana fields that were later scorched in the drought that followed, causing tens of thousands of dollars in losses, according to farmers who cultivate pot outside the legal system. It destroyed everything, said Danielle Bozra, who grows marijuana in the southwest part of Jamaica in a historical village called Akampong, founded by escaped 18th century slaves known as Maroons. Worsening the problems were strict COVID-19 measures, including a 6 p.m. curfew that meant farmers couldn't tend to their fields at night, as is routine, said Kenrick Wallace, 29, who cultivates 2 acres, nearly a hectare, in Akampong, with the help of 20 other farmers. He noted that a lack of roads forces many farmers to walk to reach the fields and then to get water from the wells and springs. Many were unable to do those chores at night due to the curfew. Wallace estimated he lost more than $18,000 in recent months and cultivated only 300 pounds compared to the average 700 to 800 pounds the group normally produces. Activists say they believe the pandemic and the loosening of Jamaica's marijuana laws has led to an increase in local consumption that has contributed to the scarcity, even if the pandemic has put a dent in the arrival of ganja-seeking tourists. Last year was the worst year. We've never had this amount of loss, Thompson said. It's something so laughable that cannabis is short in Jamaica. Yeah. So that's certainly affecting their crops and their production and profits. And it's also going to affect their tourism, because tourism is a lot to do with the marijuana laws, or just, that's not necessarily stigma, but just the image of Rasta and marijuana, Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to Jamaica, although I am from the Caribbean, so I'm familiar with the culture and that way of life. But yeah, it would be nice to go. It would be nice to check that out, just to at least, say I went. But yeah, it is interesting to see that, because now if you try to buy off the street, or this is more in terms of legal. The legal industry is facing these troubles. I mean, I guess with the marijuana, street drugs, you're getting all kinds of stuff. But again, it's a Caribbean island nation, banana republic, so there's high levels of corruption with the police and such. But yeah, again, I just wanted to at least touch up on this, because this is just another effect of the climate changing and extreme weather events, and how that's affecting not just only food products, but also just other agricultural crops that we depend on. So you can imagine this would affect hemp farmers, cotton, all different sorts of I'm not sure exactly what the difference between edible and other non-edible crops are. But yeah, just agriculture as a whole is going to face so many different problems, and that's going to have huge effects to the economy and our just access to material resources. So anyway, I just want to touch upon that little story. And that is effectively what I wanted to touch up on this episode. And before I close out, I at least wanted to make recommendations to some channels that I've seen recently, because on this show I'm always recommending channels that are better than me. And there's two that I've been stuck with, that I've been listening to and liked a lot. So the first one is Historic Hindsight, and it's effectively just a channel. They're, for the most part, they're just a Civil War buff channel, but they touch up on other different subject matters. It's nice to listen to them, and they have good funny banter, just going over historic moments. Their first episode over the Battle of the Crater is like the way that they follow the events and just the pure incompetence of the officer corps and just the whole disaster as a whole. It's certainly a good listen. Good, it's about an hour, but it's at least entertaining. I listen to it when I'm working. Just hearing them banter and just going over history. But yeah, Historic Hindsight. Check them out there, and also on YouTube. I'm not sure if he has any other work, but on YouTube I found another channel called RM Brown, and I think he's just now starting to blow up, because he's certainly a funny guy. He's certainly funny. He does like the soundboard, goofs. So yeah, it's definitely something that having a lot of fun with, a lot of sarcasm. He's in Texas also. It's one of those guys where like I like them and I think they're funny, but then if they ever found out my show, they would just tear me apart. Like, look at this guy. And so so definitely check him out there too. RM Brown. But yeah. So with that being said, I'm going to at least, just keep working on the show and get to y'all. I keep saying that I want to do like weekly reviews and weekly, down the line, maybe I can do a review of a movie or something. But I keep making these promises of what I'm going to do with the show and the content that I can put out. I'm very limited on just the hardware that I have, my setup, the time working. And it's not and sometimes I'm just like, I'm so tired, like I just don't even want to research. I just want to sit down and watch YouTube. So yeah, that's something that I have to get underway. But yeah, just working on different content and getting that out. But I just found that it's better to just release when I'm ready. At the very least, I'm going to put something out. I want to take my time to look over some things, and still I miss a lot. Like, there's a lot of things that I miss up on. So yeah. But I still appreciate y'all just sitting through and listening and dealing with everything, I guess, coming to this space and just hearing me rant and talk. But yeah, if you want to at least follow me, I do have my Twitter, Collapse Talk Pod, or the handle is @CollapseTalkPod. And yeah, the things that I post out there, I'm just shit posting and memeing, whatever. It's like, on one hand, I'm kind of like, oh man, people aren't really noticing me on the internet. But then I'm like, oh wait, this is Twitter. I'm probably better off being ignored. So yeah. So if you feel like it, follow me there. I'm probably going to be far more active and engaging. And, like Twitter is one of those places where I feel like a boomer. I'm just like, what? Like, yeah. So there's that. Twitter, got the YouTube. I had released a fan music video. I did the song War from Idols and did my own little fan music video. I just like doing whatever I feel like putting out, I'll just put it out, and then hope y'all enjoy it or not. It's really up to y'all. But I just want to do this for fun, really. Like, it just sucks because we live in this capitalist society, so everything you have to do has to be for profit. Yeah, so for this, it's more for fun, just for shits and giggles, and really just offering my views on this, because we're living in an age of podcasters, and everybody's 4D chess, grand strategy geopolitical mastermind now. So yeah. Anyway, with that being said, if I missed anything out, definitely reach out to me and let me know. I have my email, collapseduckpod@outlook.com. If you want to reach out to me there, or the Patreon. For $1 a month, you get 48-hour early access if you feel it's worth it. But yeah, other than that, I hope to just hunker down with this winter storm and try not to, put myself on the road too much. But outside of that, just chilling, big chilling. So hopefully y'all are having a good weekend and staying warm. Yeah, just be careful with the ice. That's all I have to say there. So yes, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see y'all on the next one. Thank you.